Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, all about working in sessions when you're traveling or working on location, and then integrating that back into your main catalog or storage or whatever when you get back home. So it's something I've been wanting to talk about for a long time. It might sound technical or complicated, but it's actually really super simple, which is good. And I hope it's a workflow that a lot of you can benefit from and pick up as well. So before we get to that, just some housekeeping. If this is the first time that you're joining us, my name's David. I'm part of the software sales team based out of Copenhagen in Denmark. Hang on, just need to turn my monitor down in the background. And as usual, we have a maximum of 60 minutes allocated today. We might not need all of that. As I said, it's relatively simple, but we won't go for longer than that. I am recording the webinar. They will always go up on our Learning Hub, and I'll give you the link at the end, so don't worry about that. You're very welcome and encouraged to submit your questions at any time, and of course partake in the chat room, which most of you have discovered now. So just a little warning about the chat room. It is public, so everything that you say will be publicly visible, so make sure you're nice to each other and so on, which I'm sure you will be. Now, there is rather a lot of you today, so if you do want to ask an actual question, to make sure that it doesn't get missed, you can actually add your chat message to the Q&A as well, and then there's more chance of us seeing it. And I say us because we have Andre. You might see he's got a little star next to his name. He's also part of the Capture One team, and he can help out answering a few questions and things as well. You can also formally just go straight to the Q&A and ask a question there as well. But if neither of that interests you, you can minimize the chat or float it in a separate window if you don't want to be distracted. So there's also Irina as well, who's also part of the Capture One team, who's also in the chat as well. So if you see Irina or Andre asking questions, they're not just super helpful people, they do work for us as well. So let us begin. All right, so as I said, what the plan is today, I'm going to show you how I work if I'm on holiday or traveling, working away and so on, using a session, and then how that gets integrated back into my main storage back at home. So the first thing we're going to do is make a session and get some images into that, talk a little bit about organization and exporting as well. And then once we're done and we have imaginatively come back home, how do we then integrate that into our own storage as well? So let's get rid of me. And the first thing that we're going to do is go into Capture One, of course, and we're going to say File. Let's just close this catalog. We don't really need that. It was just there for decoration. And we're going to say New Session. Okay, and we're going to give this a name. So what should we call this? We'll just call it, well, I'm going to use an example of a trip that I did in 2018. So California 2018. And if you're not sure what a session is, it's just, if you like, designed for a single project or job. And it makes these four folders by default, and I'm not going to change anything away from the default, and it's going to go into my pictures folder. If we click on this box, then we can change the location of our session. Okay, but I'm just going to leave everything as default, and we'll have a look at what the session looks like once it has been made. So that's going to create our session. So a brand new empty session. Let's go into Finder as well. And then if we go into our pictures folder, you can see this is what's being created. So a capture, output, selects, and trash folder. And this funny file here, the co-session DB, this is just like a small database that keeps track of things like smart albums and albums, which we're going to get onto also in the webinar as well. So we have these four folders which are also shown in Capture One itself over here on the left hand side. So capture, selects, output and trash. So simple shortcuts to those. So let's imagine we are on my imaginary holiday, and first of all we need to get some images into our session. We've been out, we've been shooting, whether that's over the course of 1 day or several days. So I have memory card here, like so. Is my camera going to grab focus? No. Anyway, I'm sure you can see that it's just a standard SD card. So we're going to start by putting this in my card reader and then importing. So let's put that in, like so. Get rid of me. So the import window pops up in Capture One and shows me the contents of this memory card. Now, you are probably going to do this more than once, especially if it's an extended trip or more than 1 day. But what I've got here is a selection of images that was shot over several different days. Okay, because I just want to show you how I sort them as I would go through, you know, a trip or something like that, or a location job and so on. So the import from, of course, that's just picked up that it's the memory card, so that's popped up automatically. And now import to, if I actually reset this dialog, by default the destination is set to the session folder. Now what I want them to do is to go into the capture folder, like so. The session folder means the top level, so it will populate kind of in here in a messy way, which I don't want. I want them to go into the capture folder. So first of all, we're going to change this here to capture folder, like so. Now subfolder, this is where we can specify them to be put into an additional folder. Now you can do a manual type ahead in here. So if you wanted to, let's say we went to whatever, Sea Life Centre, just thinking of something off the top of my head, we can type that in here. But I want to automate this process so that we don't have to think about it when we're importing again at a later date, the day after, and so on. So what we can do is use a token. Now a token in Capture One, which you'll see pop up in all kinds of places, importing, exporting, file naming, or whatever. You'll see how it looks in a second. They basically grab some form of metadata from the image. So it could be the date that it was captured, which is what we're going to do, special clue. It could be any kind of camera metadata like lens or shutter that is used. It could be any IPTC information like your copyright info and so on. So any kind of metadata that you can think of that is in the image, we can grab that and use it to create folders, naming conventions, and all kinds of other sort of useful stuff as well. So back into Capture One, we're going to click on the square box here. And then I'm going to switch this to date and time. That will just filter down to the various useful things. So date and time, rather than having this enormous long list, which I'm sure most of us won't have a use for all of these, but somebody somewhere has a use for one of them. But we're going to filter down to date and time, like so, and we're going to use image date. So that was the date that the image was captured. Now there's lots of different ways that you can display the date. It could be up to you. I mean, typically we do year, month, day, but let's go for month, day and year, like so, and say okay. Now Capture One will give you a sample down here, so sample path, so you can see exactly what's going to happen. And that's all I'm going to do. So for the import, we're going to keep it nice and simple. Actually, let's throw in a rename as well. So by default, it's just going to use the name on the raw file. Now that was I was a bit lazy. That was all I did. I just thought, oh, I'd just leave it to the name on the camera on the raw file. But I did run into an issue at some point where I didn't have unique names. So of course, in my catalog, I was getting some shots that were from years back having the same raw file name as today, which is not good. So it probably should be a good idea to think about having some unique names. And there's lots of different ways to do that, but what I will do, let's go for, again, this is a token, the little grey thingy. So let's go up here and I'm going to just choose a preset, job and image name, like so. So if we say that, we've got a job name and an image name. And if we wanted to, let's also add in the image date as well. Why not? And then that way it's going to be super unique. And let's do year, month, day. And what we can also do, so they're not all kind of wedged together, we can just cursor in between, and we can just put in a hyphen in between two as well. So now, untitled job, let's just call this Cali 2018. So now I'm going to have nice, unique file names as well. So if I click on, you know, one of these or whatever, then you see it's going to show me what the name is, like so. Now that's just one method, but any sort of method where you can get a unique name is a good idea. Don't fall into the trap I did, of course. Okay, so we're going to leave it at that. Let's just close this down, and we're going to say, let's just select all, so we've got all of them. We're going to import 54 images, so they're going to be renamed and then sorted into those folders by date. Now I just saw something flash past on chat about JPEGs. So you'll see here this option, if you click on the 3 dots in the naming convention, then you'll be able to pair your RAWs and JPEGs together, so that each RAW and each JPEG will have the same name except for the extension, of course. So if you shoot both, then that's a good idea. Okay, so let's say import 54 images and see what happens. Now, the first thing that pops up is this slightly sort of confusing message that says Untitled Album Created, and we can see it over here on the left hand side. So that will simply create a collection of everything that was imported in this instance. Now you can safely delete it if you want to, or what I've been doing just for the sake of it is if I right click, I can say rename, and I just call this my first import, like so. All right, so now we've got the shots coming in. Capture One is building the previews and so on. Now, if we go to my Finder while that's churning away, we can now see we've got the various different folders like so, March 2nd, March 3rd, March 4th, and then also we've got our unique image names as well. So that's a good sort of automated way to start. Now, of course, if I then shot on March the 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th, I could just whack in my memory card again. If we go back to the import window, let's just click on import up in the top left. All of this can stay exactly the same. So I don't have to go in and change anything else. So it's just exactly the same. So this is like a nice automated process that you can just keep working on. So a question from Michael, no it wasn't Michael, to import speed. There's lots of different factors, of course. So what's going to affect your import speed is speed of the SD card. So depending how fast that can write. Speed of your reader. So I've got a StarTech, actually we can eject it now. 1 second, let's just eject my reader and try not to unplug anything else. So I've just got a dual slot StarTech. Sorry, it's probably not going to focus. A dual slot StarTech SD reader on USB-C, so that's nice and quick. Obviously the speed of your hard drive, how quickly it can pull the data in, that's going to affect it. Building previews is processor based, not GPU based, so even with a big fat GPU like I've got, it doesn't make any difference. So speed of card reader, and the recipient, as in is the hard drive on your machine, SSD or whatever. So I'm just went straight from SD to that. Okay, let's have a look at the next step. Okay, so now we've got, if we look in Finder, let's get rid of me, we can see we've got our, come on Finder, where'd you go? We've got our 3 import folders sitting nicely in our capture folder. Now right now, Capture One has no idea that these exist as such, apart from we've got our nice collection here. Now if you want to be able to access these quickly, then what we can do is on Mac, we can pick them up and drag them to session favorites like so. On a PC, you'll have to hit the plus button like so, and then add them. But Mac, you can drag and drop. PC, you can hit plus and add that as a favorite. Now what that means is, if I just hide my viewer, for a second. Let's hide the viewer. Then we can just browse through and then we can see those various different locations like so, or different folders like so. Now by default you've got some session albums which appear in every session, which shows me every single image in the session. So that's going to show me all of them, all the 5-star images, which there aren't any at the moment, and of course that import which popped up straight away. So that's our first step. Now let me just have a look at some questions that came in. Shy, can we make the webinar display in full screen? You can full screen your browser, just to let you know, and hide the chat, but you can't go full screen. How do I get all my tags into the sessions that I'm able to tag pictures while away from my master catalog? Morton was asking. Just qualify or quantify, Morton. When you say tags, do you mean keywords? If so, you can make a keyword library. So we'll remind me and we'll have a quick look at that. But if you make a keyword library, that's available in all your catalogs and sessions, and then you can just keyword like so. And I think that's it for questions at the moment. So Morton, just qualify when you say tag if you mean keywords. And duplicates, yes. So if, for example, you whacked in the same memory card again, make sure you're just putting exclude duplicates. And then that way you won't get the same images twice. So yes, Morton, for your keywords, if you look in the keywords here, what you should do is make yourself a keyword library. So you can hit on the create keyword library here. So am I not hiding that with my face? Let's get rid of that. So you can say create keyword library, and you can import from text files and a few other things, or download a library from the web if you can find some freebies or paid for ones, and then that will appear in all your catalogs and sessions. Okay, so the next step for me is to pick out the good shots from some of my crappy shots, essentially. So what I do is we can either go through folder by folder, or we just go through all images like so. And my first pass, and this is my method, your kind of differences may vary of course, but what I do first of all is to go through and tag anything that I think might be worthy of further processing or a look, is to add it with a green tag. Now there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can do the slow way, which is to choose it under the image directly, or you can look under adjustments and you'll see under color tag what particular shortcut you've got set. Now I have green as 7, yellow as 8 and red as 9, and the reason for that is that it sits quite nicely on a numerical keypad. So 7, 8 and 9. If you want to change the shortcut, don't forget you can look at edit keyboard shortcuts, and then if you want to find it, just type in green, and then you'll be able to change the adjustments for your various different color tags like so. So what I can do is I can put my mouse or pen down, and then we can just use the cursor keys, or command cursor key or control cursor key to go through. So looking at these, let's mark this one green. Let's have a look at that one, and this one, and so on. So we can whiz through relatively quickly and think, is any of this going to be interesting? Let's take this one, and so on. Let's have one of Zeph, my buddy Zeph from New York, and this one, and so on. So I'm just going to quickly go through and tag some of these shots, not paying too much attention. Now if there's like a sequence like this, 3 similar shots, what I tend to do is shift click, so I can look at them all together and think, sorry, these 3, so shift click these 3 and think, okay, out of these 3, which is the most interesting? Is it this one? Is it this one? Is it this one? Now if I decide it's this one and I hit green, so if I hit 7 on my keyboard, then it's going to mark all of them green, which we don't want. So this is where this funny little button up here in the top left comes into play. So this is essentially a toggle that says make the edit to everything or just the primary. That's the one with the thick white border. So if I turn this off and now hit number 7, then it only tags this one green. So at some point you will probably inadvertently turn this off and it will drive you crazy, because when you do things like exporting out your images to TIFFs and JPEGs, it will only do one. And you'll think, I've selected 30, but it's only processing out one image. Why is that? Because this is turned off. So by default it's on, but it's handy for a selection process like this. So let's keep going. Let's grab our cypress tree, and again we've got a sequence here, so I could shift select the first to the last, and out of all of these I think let's just choose that one, like so. And moving on, let's grab this one, and I think we're nearly at the end, and finally take this one. Oh, let's have a motorbike for interest and a funny bike as well. There we go. So now we've gone through. If I hide my viewer, don't forget you can set a shortcut to hide and show your viewer. Then now I can see that out of all of these shots, some of them have green tags. Now it would be nice if we can just focus on our green tags now. There's a couple of ways you can do this. You can use a filter, of course, just by turning on the filter down here, like so. But what I prefer to do, to save me having to go in and out of filters all the time, is to make a smart album in the session albums area. So you've got two kinds of albums. You've got a smart album. So if we look at the plus here, we've got an album and a smart album. Now an album is just a drag and drop collection, if you like, where a smart album will populate itself based on the search criteria you set. So an obvious thing to do here would be to create a smart album that only looks at our green tags. So let's do that. So we're going to say make a new smart album, and we're going to call this my first picks. Doesn't have to be called green, we can just call it anything you like, but I'll put in brackets green tags. So my first picks, this kind of helicopter view. Now there's a handy preset here which we can just choose, like so. So the color tag is green. Now we say OK, and it's made my smart album like so. And now we have a nice selection of all the green tags. Now the nice thing about this is that it's dynamic. Of course, we can go to any of them and think, you know what, this is actually a bit of a boring shot. If I clear this tag, and that's number 6 on my keyboard, then it goes away. So it's a nice sort of dynamic selection that we can always change. Or if I think, you know what, I'm sure there was a better one in this sequence, I can always go back wherever that was. Which one was it? This one. I think maybe I preferred this one. And then now it's automatically added to my selection like so. So I personally think that's faster than going through and turning filters on and off all the time. Now the second pass that I do is I look at my greens. So let's start at the top. And whoops, don't need to zoom out. And then what I do is I incorporate a star rating as well. Now there's tons of different ways to do this. So just to stress once more, this is my sort of preferred method. But there's, you know, 1,000 different ways you can tag and rate. Some people start with 5 stars and go down to 1. Some people start with 1 and progress up to 5. I just have 2 stages like this, but you have 7 color tags, 5 stars to play with, any kind of combination. So you can kind of find your own way if you like. All right, so now this one, I'm gonna think I can probably make something out of this, and I might just check that it's got enough dynamic range just by playing around with the sliders and think, yeah, we can do something with that. So I'm gonna hit 5 on my keyboard, and that makes it a 5-star. So I think this one in hindsight might be fun, but I'm not gonna spend any time on it. This one I like, so I'm gonna make that 5 stars. This one for now, I might send it to Zeph, but of course it's not something I'm going to think is portfolio worthy. Sorry, Zeph. This one, I think we could probably make something out of that. So let's call that 5 stars. This one, maybe not. This one, let's see, is there enough something in the shot to make it interesting, yeah, we can probably do something with that. So that's 5 stars. This one, actually, which one is better? This one is better. So once again, I'm just going to zero that out. And this one is good. That's nice for a fun shot to show someone, but probably won't spend too much time on it. And then the waves are more fun here, so that's 5 stars. Good old bird rock. This one's better, so let's do a 5 star. 5 star for that one. And then these two, they just might be fun to show someone, but I'm not going to spend much time on them. So now we've got a second pass, which is 5 stars and green tags. So of course the first smart album was just green tags, but we can combine 2 or more items together to make another smart album. So same process as before. We go for a new smart album right here, and this is going to be top picks, and this is green tag. Oops, supposed to be a bracket there. This is green tag and 5 star, so a combo. So we can't use a preset because we're going to combine. So we're going to say that the color tag is green, and with the plus down here, the rating equals, and you've got all these other combinations as well, is 5 stars. And we say okay. So now we've got, let's hide my viewer. So now this is the top picks, the green tag plus 5 stars. And once again, it's dynamic. So of course, if you think, what on earth was I thinking? This picture isn't interesting. I can zero that. Just zero on my keyboard and it disappears. So now we've got a really, nice dynamic way to sort of sort through our various shots. As I said, there's 1,000 different ways to do this, but take inspiration from this, remembering you've got all those color tags, 7 I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yep, all those color tags, and 1 to 5 stars, so there's lots of different ways to color and rate and so on. So that is the second stage. Now we might do some editing, so I'm not going to spend a load of time editing today, but I'll show you an example of an edit and an export which you can categorize further, which I think is an important step. Just have a look at a question Jason was asking. Does the make edit do everything work with metadata? Select a bunch of images and add a keyword or a description. Generally yes. So if I selected all and we wanted to add a keyword like California, enter, then you'll find that it's added to everything, like so. With a metadata description, no. So if I went to metadata and we asked something, oh, 1 second. So I think my phone was about to go off, so I just put it on silent. So if we wanted to add, let's just add creator, let's just put my name, like so. Then you'll find it will only be added to this one. But if I select all, just checking you can still see. Yep, if we select all and we click the little up down arrow in the metadata tool, then we can actually add various things across. So if I want to just make sure it's only the creator, I can uncheck the other boxes, say apply, and then that will now be copied across. So Jason, I know there's a couple of ambiguous kind of points there, but once you know what does apply and what doesn't, it's pretty easy to get your head around. Now, if you used a metadata preset, if I selected all, the rules of presets apply, which is if I applied this preset from Andrew, for example, then it would apply to everything. Okay, hope that makes sense. All right, so now we're going to do a faux sort of quick edit, because I think what will be interesting to see is while I'm on the road, I sometimes do quick edits, throw it up on Instagram. I've got quite keen on being a bit analog and sending a postcard, and there's a couple of really cool postcard services as well that we can use. So let's edit this quickly. and then I'll show you exactly what I mean. So first of all, if I was going to do an edit, let's just do a quick crop on this shot, for example. Quick crop. I'm going to fix the white balance. I'm going to make it a bit colder. So let's cool it down. Let's add some contrast. Bit of clarity. It's in my second exposure tab. Bit of clarity. Let's open up shadows and fix some highlights. Okay, so we have a basic edit. So this is cropped as I wish. It's got, you know, my general editing. So I'm going to do that, and I'm happy with that. But now I want to send a postcard. Now the postcard service I use is called TouchNote. Now I'm sure there's plenty of other systems out there, but I don't want to change the cropping on this because this is cropped to how I would display it on a website or, you know, social media or something like that. But what TouchNote does has a very specific cropping size. So what I do, I'm going to go up to image and say clone variant, and that will give me a virtual copy of the shot, which I can now crop to some specific sizes for, you know, Instagram or whatever. So if we go over to my process recipes, and we're going to make a new process recipe for TouchNote, or it could be for a print or Instagram or whatever. You can see my Instagram one here. It just changes the width to 2048 pixels. So let's make a new process recipe, and we're going to call this a TouchNote postcard, like so, and it's going to be a JPEG. And we're going to go Adobe RGB, why not? And it has very odd specific dimensions in pixels, which fortunately I wrote down, which is 1819 by 1382, like so. So now in my crop tool, a handy little trick, you see when I select the crop tool, it's resized this to 1819 pixels, but the height is wrong. Now you can try and fuss about trying to get it correct, or you can do a very simple thing, which is change your crop dimensions to the current output. So if we do that, and then we grab the corner, you see it snaps straight away. And now I'm set to my exact dimensions. So it's a slightly odd size, and now it means I can just resize to what I think looks good. Like so. Now one important step that I do is that I change this color tag to purple. So I know it's now a TouchNote postcard. Note that it disappeared, like so. Now what I'm going to do here is make just another quick smart album, and we're going to call this TouchNote Postcards. I'm honestly not sponsored by them. That would be nice. And choose purple as my preset, like so, and say OK. And now if I go to this one, I can see my nicely cropped TouchNote postcard, like so. Now to export this, very simple. I'll show you another little trick. By default, if I just, let's open up process summary. If I just hit process now, then it will go straight to the session output folder as a JPEG, as I have it set here. But what I want to do is, let's say I might do an Instagram, and Michael, I'll come back to your question in a second. What I want to do is be able to sort them based on the kind of output that they are. If I change in output location, remember tokens again. Remember we said that you'll see tokens for various different things like import, naming convention, and so on. We can also use tokens on output to define different locations. So a very easy, simple thing to do. And if it's the only sort of token that you're ever going to use, it's probably a great one. And if you start typing ahead, which is recipe, then we can divide out by recipe name, like so. So now if we process this guy out, so let's say process, and I've also got recipe name in my output naming tag as well. So if we say process, go to my output folder, you'll see it's in a folder called TouchNote Postcard, and it's also got TouchNote Postcard in the name. and it's also resized to the correct amount and so on. Okay, so now one further thing that I like to do, which hold this for the future. One further thing that we're going to do is that any outputs that I make, let's do a quick Instagram as well. Let's just choose any old other shot, and you could do exactly the same thing before. You could make another color tag for Instagram and all that kind of stuff. But let's just grab something quickly for Instagram. Hey, look, there's a cool motorbike kind of thing. We could use my Instagram recipe, and let's say process. And if we go back to Finder, you can see we've got Instagram like so, and it's got Instagram in the name. So you see how that was all nice and automated. I didn't have to think about renaming or any of that kind of stuff. It's all nicely managed. Now, the last thing I do for Mac users before we get on to the next part is that I also grab these and add them to session favorites like so. Now, again, if you're on PC, you've got to click the plus button so that you can add them manually. So you can't drag and drop in Windows, unfortunately. So what this means is that now I can look at the various different import folders that we created based on date. So these three here, and more as our location job or trip would allow us to do. And then I can also see the outputs. So there's my Instagram output like so, and there's my TouchNote postcard. So I can look at all my various different imports and outputs. Now you could say, well, why don't you just click on the output folder here? But there's nothing in the output folder because it's got subfolders in it. So if you remember, this is looking at the contents of the output folder. This is looking at the contents of the capture folder, which is also empty, which is why it's really important to add those things to the various session favorites. Also, if you don't add to session favorites, then any smart albums that you make will only search capture selects outputs and trash. So by adding things to session favorites, you're also making Capture One aware that these things should appear in your search results, like smart albums and filtering and using other search bars and so on and so forth. Okay, so Michael's question. Let's just scroll up a minute. Yeah, it's interesting. Let's go back and look at the Instagram process recipe. So I did an experiment. I tried 1080 and I tried 2048. And if I look on my Instagram profile and look at the shots that were exported larger and pinch to zoom, they actually hold up better. So I thought I'd just go with that. So I know reading around you see 1080, but I also see some other reports that you can make it larger. So do it yourself. Don't take my word for it. Do a 1080, do a 2048, and then see where you get to. And where was that? Let's see. So I was looking for a question. Oh, about avoid compression. So you can actually preview what the compression is doing. So if we open a shot which I know has got probably good sharpness, let's see, this is relatively sharp. So let's just throw in a bit of clarity and structure for good measure as well. Let's just get rid of me for a second. So let's just have a bit of clarity and structure. So we've got a nice super sharp shot here. So notice I'm looking at 100%. And my Instagram recipe is chosen. So if we turn on the spectacle icon up here, this will proof down to the export size, like so. Let's just put process summary away. So now we're actually proofing our resolution and also our JPEG compression. So it might be hard for you to see on the webinar, but if I turn this down to 0, you might have to zoom in a bit. Then what will happen is that you'll start to see the effects of JPEG compression. So you can dial this down and try this yourself at home. It's probably not so easy to see on a broadcast and so on. But as you moderate this, you'll get an idea of what the JPEG compression is actually doing. So then you can balance that based on size and so on. So if you look in the process summary, if I go down to 0, you see it's going to be 195 kilobytes. If we go up to 100, it's going to be 2 meg. So you can really kind of decide the best bias between quality and file size. So try that at home. That was Clive asking, I think, as well. So Michael was asking, why not add the whole folders tree to the session folders section? Well, you can actually just browse. I'll show you what you can do if you want to. If you right click on this, you can say show in library. And then look, you can just browse the whole tree if you wish. But to be honest, I just like having my session favorites here, because then I don't have to go digging into this area whatsoever. I can look at, let's turn proofing off. We can look at, of course, March 2nd, March 3rd, March 4th. I can see stuff I've done for Instagram. I can see postcards. I can see all my smart albums. It just avoids having another thing open, if you like. Okay, I like that, Johnny. When and how do you set up your process recipes? I'm too lazy to do this. Well, think of it this way. Remember, it's a one-time operation. So how long did it take me to make that postcard one? Like 30 seconds, 1 minute. And once it's made, it's made. So what it avoids you doing is to go in and saying file, export images, going in and then setting it all up, exporting, and then, oh, now I need a TIFF. So I have to change all my export settings to something else. So yes, Johnny, it is an investment for the future. I guess we should say that. But if you do that, then of course it saves you time later. Okay. Let's just check the Q&A box as well. Morton, we answered you. That's good. Let's see. Can you tell capture folder to also include subfolders? No. So the capture folder will only show the contents of the capture folder. So it's actually a shortcut. So you can actually define any folder as a capture folder, which is great when you're shooting tethered, so you can have multiple different capture folders. That's a whole other subject for a different webinar. But no, it will only show the contents of one folder. Good question from Mark. If I've registered Capture One on my iMac, can I put a copy on my second one? So yes, if you have bought the license outright, you get 3 installs. If you're subscribing, you get 2 installs. So you can always run more than one machine. Dido, you had a question about editing. Does it matter what I edit first? I would watch last week's recording. I think last week's, because I spoke quite a lot about that. It doesn't really matter what you do first. I personally fix exposure white balance and then go on to edit. And what do I use for uploading to Instagram? Well, I can't speak for the PC users, but on Mac I use a little application called Flume, F-L-U-M-E. And the cool thing is on the process recipe, I can say open with. Oh, let's get rid of me. My head's in the way. Sorry, let's do that again. I can say open with down here in the process recipe. And then I can choose, where are you? Flume, like so. And then as soon as the process is done, like it's processed from Capture One, it opens up Flume, gives me a preview. I can add hashtags and all that other stuff. Raphael, your question is well timed, because that is what we are going to do next. So, holiday is over, sad face. So now what we do, we've got our session organized, remember? So let's just hide me for a second. We've got our session organized. So we've got all our session albums and favorites in place. And of course we could have more exports here and so on. So the session is done. We are now happy, or we're not happy because we're back at home. But everything is ready to merge into our main catalog. So I'm going to close this session down. And just remember, if you want to be, let's cancel. If you want to be extra specially careful on the road about backups, then don't forget you can just back up this entire folder. So I could drag and drop this entire folder to any kind of storage medium I wanted, or put it on cloud storage or whatever, and then that session is always safe. And then to open that session, again, we can just actually double click on the little co-session DB folder, and then you'll see it will open up nicely into Capture One, like so. But now we're back at home, and now we need to integrate this into my main catalog. So this is my little Capture One 12 demo catalog, and all the images are stored actually on this external hard drive you can see over here. And this is actually my real life set up at home, if you like. So I have my catalog on my laptop, and then sitting under this desk here is a little bank of hard drives where all my images are stored. So I don't carry images on my laptop because there's not enough space. So I have catalog database on my laptop, and then images are stored externally on a twin drive system that's sitting under the desk. So what we need to do now is, of course, get this session into my main catalog. So let's open up this catalog. So here is my catalog, like so. And then we've got a really important step to do before anything else. So here is my catalog. You can see it's got various user collections. You can see this is where all the images live in various different folders. So what we need to do is import this session into the catalog. Now, before I do that, let's hide Capture One. I want to make sure that my session is in the right place. So I'm going to move this whole session, just a drag and drop onto my external hard drive, because this is where I'm going to keep the session moving forward, like so. So that's going to copy across, and we're done. So now if I go back to Capture One, very, very simple. All I need to do is say File, Import Session, go to that external hard drive, find the session, and click on the co-session DB folder, like so, and say Import. And then right away what you'll see is that it starts to import. Now they're not being moved or copied or anything like that. Just Capture One is reading all the images, finding the metadata, of course, making any edits that we might do, and so on. And what happens if we look over here, like so, Capture One has automatically made us a project. And in that project, you can see all my session albums and favorites and so on. Now on the top, if I just click on the project, it actually shows me the entire contents of that entire trip. So that's a really nice helicopter overview. Then I can, of course, go through 5 stars, and it's only showing me 5 stars from California. I can see my postcards. I can see my top picks, my fast picks, basically everything that was in the session. And of course I can see the session favorites, like so, and then my exports to Instagram, which we can see, and also the postcard that I made, and so on. So it's just a real easy one-shot input like that. Now, super, super important thing. Now, bearing in mind I've now safely backed up my catalog, this one that's sitting on my hard drive, I can just delete that, it's gone, because now we're looking at this one here. Now the second important caveat, of course, is that this session, I could still open it independently if I wanted to, but I won't. So I could still open that session independently if I wanted to, but I'm never going to do that from now on. I'm now working off it in my catalog, because the session, if you like, database and the catalog database, they don't talk to each other. So it's not a two-way communication. It's a one-shot. So when you import that session into Capture One, it will read all the adjustments, metadata, everything, but it's a one-time only operation. So now on moving forward, if I wanted to make edits to these shots and everything, I'm going to be doing that from within the catalog, I'm not going to be opening up that sole session. So as long as you're aware of that, then you're not going to get unstuck. It's just important to know that it's not a two-way communication between the two. So you can also think of it as, well, at what point do I introduce that into my catalog? So as soon as I come back, I just tend to play around in the session a bit more, finish it, and then I import it into my catalog. So, but that's a choice that you can make as well. Okay, let's have a look at my question. Let's see. If you have lots of different shots to import, is manually adding keywords the only option? You can add a keyword preset. So if you have a bunch of keywords, you can save that as a preset. So if you always have travel, landscape, USA or whatever, you can save that group of keywords as a preset. And then when you import, so if we go back into our import dialog, under adjustments, you can add a preset here, and that will add those keywords into that preset. So that's one way to do it. Or once you have imported, you can also just select all the images and start adding keywords, and that will add it to everything. Let's see. Can I back up simultaneously to another SSD connected to my Mac? Can it be synced in terms of edits? You can't do that automatically from Capture One, but there's a whole bunch of different applications that will do that for you, because all that you need to do is tell Capture One or your syncing software to sync that folder. So the master session folder. So look for changes in that session folder and sync it to this other place. For example, on the Mac, ChronoSync would just do that perfectly, which tends to be what everybody uses. So you can have ChronoSync running, and then any change you make to the session always gets backed up. And there's tons of applications that do that for Mac and PC as well. Can you move images after the fact? Yes. So of course in the folders tool down here, like if I right click and if I go on any image and say show in library, so right click on any image and say show in library, then it will show me the exact place. So for some reason I wanted to move this image to that folder, then I just drag and drop. But do it from the folders tool. If you do it in Finder, Capture One doesn't know you've done it, so then you'll have to go through the process of right-clicking images and choosing locate. But if you just do it in the folders area, you can move entire folders as well and images. So yes, you can do that. Let's see. Last couple of questions. When I import, Andreas was saying, where's the raw data? The raw data, so if you remember, before I did file import session, I put my, let's bring that back up. When I did file import session, I put the session where I wanted it to be, because that's where the Capture One catalog is going to reference to. So before you do that import session, put it in the right place. So that was just copying, if you were watching, that entire session from my from my laptop to my external, because at home I store all my images on the external drive. Should you delete the code session DB? You could do if you wanted to. I mean, it doesn't hold a lot of memory, so it depends if you can be bothered. I mean, it's 640 kilobytes, so it's not being used anymore, so you could just delete it, yes, if you wanted to. And you could also delete selects if you're not using that particular folder in the session workflow. But yes, you could, but I don't tend to, because I guess like Johnny and making process recipes, I'm lazy and I don't think to do that kind of stuff. But yes, you could. Let's see, 1 second. Just checking the Q&A. New questions. How are we doing for time? Oh, almost out. Dado, I think that question was answered about moving the session to the wrong catalog. As you know, you can always move stuff around in catalogs as long as you do it in the folders area. That's the important thing. Can you export process recipes to another Mac? Yes. So on the Mac, if you look at, go into the Go menu, hold your Alt key down, and you see Library pops up. And look in Application Support Capture 1. Let's make this a bit bigger. And then you can see recipes right here. So they're just little XML files. So you can just copy them to the same location on your other Mac. Matt says, why session instead of using a catalog importing to main later? You can do that, but I just find it much easier to use a session because it has that kind of import process structure already set up. So if you remember, if we look at the session, I just really like this aspect that I can automate all these kinds of things. If I do that in a catalog, I can do it, but then I have to kind of set all of that up. I just find it's faster and quicker to use a session, to be honest. So you can do it with a catalog, but honestly, I just think it's cleaner and easier to use a session. What you can also do, let's just close the catalog for a second. To save time, if we just open up California for a second, which I wouldn't do, just to stress, this is just because I want to show you something. If you find yourself that you're always making the same kind of albums, what you can actually do is save a template. Hang on, let's just hide me. You can save a template, a session template, and what that will do is that it will save all your session albums, naming conventions, all that kind of stuff. So the next time when you make a new session, you can actually pick the template here, and that will recreate all those smart albums for you, so you don't have to do it every single time. So that's also why I would use a session as well, because I like that template ability too. Okay, could we do a webinar on printing? We probably should, actually. It's been a while since we've done that. Wolfgang says, do I have to import the entire session to a catalog, or can I just do the smart albums? You can't pick and choose on a, if you use the file session import, you can't pick and choose. You could just pick certain folders, which also works, but I just find, just for ease and simplicity, it's easy just to import the entire session, mostly because I am too scared to delete things, and I know I should, but storage is relatively cheap. If there's anything really bad, I delete it, but I do have the habit of tending to keep everything, because sometimes you go back to a shot and actually think, you know what, at the first glance I didn't think it was this great, but it actually could be useful. So like this one, for example, looked kind of pretty crappy out of camera, but it actually, when you edit it, it comes good. So that happens quite a lot with me. All right, and last of all, before we almost have to go, let's see, 1 second, too many windows. Moving images between catalogs, Dido asked. You wouldn't necessarily do that, because a catalog can look at like 2 or 3 different catalogs to start again. If you have 1, 2, 3 catalogs, they can look at the same image. You would never duplicate the raw file. So you don't necessarily move images between catalogs. It's a process of, does catalog A recognize that a certain image exists via an import? So you wouldn't move or drag and drop between catalogs. Welton says, what do you suggest concerning the size of a catalogue? I do 1 catalogue per year. I've now got 5 catalogues. And of course, when you search, you have to remember which year it was taken. So that is the toss-up, really. I have 1 catalogue which has 18,000 images in it, which isn't huge. And that seems to tick along quite nicely. Now, there is no theoretical upper limit. What you might find is that when you first open a catalogue, it takes longer to open, of course. And depending on where it's stored, whether it's SSD or spinning drives, all those different factors, of course. So, Weltin, there is no perfect figure, but as I said, I'm ticking along with 18,000, no trouble at all. I mean, if you're in the 200,000 aspect, then I might be tempted to split it up a bit. But again, it's very much system dependent. Yes, David, I am monitoring. There we go. I'm old-fashioned and have my files in a complex file structure. How do I move files from the session into my file structure into the catalog? Well, David, that was all I do personally is use the file import session, but there's nothing to stop you. For example, if you had a complicated file structure, if we said import, then all you would actually have to do is if we choose, let's go and find California down here. So if you had a complicated structure here, for example, as long as you say open and say include subfolders, Capture One will import everything. And the other important thing that you have to do, David, is tick on include existing adjustments. And make sure in your catalog this was set to current destination. So all Capture One is going to do is look at where those shots are, use your complicated file structure and import that into the catalog. But it won't move anything or change everything. But if you want the adjustments to come across, you must have this box ticked, and you must have the include subfolders box ticked too. So if you don't want to use the session importer, that also works in much the same way. Or if you only, I can't remember who was asking, Wolf, let's say you just wanted to import the one folder. So if you only wanted to import one folder, or if you only wanted to import, let's say you'd moved everything to the selects folder and you just wanted to import that, you could do the same thing. Just make sure include existing adjustments is ticked, and then it will do pretty much the same thing. Okay, and we're out of time. Last question. What kind of storage and backup device do you use? I have two things. So I have for long-term storage at home, I've got a double bay USB 3 hard drive. So one of the drives is data and one is just a time machine backup. So if either of them crap themselves, then I have the backup. And then when I'm traveling, I can't unplug it. I might be able to. The cable's not long enough. Actually, let's just eject it. Might be grumbling. Oh, Capture One's using it. Let's try that again. Then when I'm traveling for backup, these are great. This is quite old now, but it's called a Samsung T3. Now they're up to T5s or God knows what else. This is 500 gig, and it's brilliant. And it's this one's really old, and I've dropped it and abused it, and I don't think it. Oh, there we go. And it's fantastic. So they're not cheap, but if you keep an eye out for deals on a large USA company that sells things online, then often they actually come down in price quite a bit, but they're really good and it's been faultless. So that's a Samsung T3, but I think they're called T5s these days. All right, I think we are now out of time for sure. So sorry if we didn't get to your very specific question, but there was rather a lot of you. But thanks, of course, to Andre mopping up questions in the background and so on and so forth, and Arena as well. So thanks for watching, everybody. The recording will go up probably tomorrow at some point, so keep your eyes peeled for it then. But you will get an automated email that says, hey, the recording is ready. So no need to really think about it too much. You can always find it there. Thanks, everybody. Take care and see you next time. Cheers. Bye now.